everyone, welcome to Learning Under the Surface, a podcast series by SkillSpring. I'm your host for this podcast and my name is Pooja Aman Sharma. I'm a co-founder of SkillSpring, a learning facilitator, a coach with over 2 decades plus of experience. In Learning Under the Surface, we call eminent personalities from the industry speakers, coaches and facilitators. And today with us we have Roopshree Surana with us. Roopshree is an esteemed facilitator with over almost 2 decades of experience. She's a facilitator and she believes in transforming the lives of people through facilitation. She's also been actively involved in IEF feature of Bangalore. So Roopshree, though I have introduced you, is there anything additional that you would like to add for everybody who's going to watch this podcast of us?
I'm in the space of learning and development for almost 2 decades now, and it's purely out of passion that I have transitioned from being a software developer to a people development individual. And this curiosity about people psychology and their mindsets and behaviors has what led to this transition. And I'm really passionate about the space that I am in. And I'm super excited to interact and share my experiences with all of you today. Thank you, Pooja. Over to you.
Roopshree, welcome again to our podcast, Learning Under the Surface. To start off with, I wanted to ask you, could you share more about your background and your journey in consulting and L&D space? Everybody would like to know more about.
Sure, thank you, Pooja. As I was mentioning, that it's purely out of passion and wanting to know more about people's psychology and mindsets that led me to come into this learning and development space. Over the years, this curiosity about and my work in this space has led me to get into the consulting space, where I work at the intersection of business outcomes and human capability, wherein I help leaders and their teams to translate intent into action. This is the core space that I work in, and a very dear space for me is to work and help leaders foster psychological safety. That's the research work that I'm currently focusing on, wherein the different projects that I have undertaken is how leaders work with vulnerability, accountability, adaptability, purpose-driven leadership. These are different spaces that I'm working in.
My next question is relevant to all organizations and all the facilitators and consultants, which is that every organization invests so much heavily into learning and development, but when it comes to impact, they struggle. So why do you think that happens?
Absolutely, that's a great question. In the space of learning and development that I have been, and the work that I've been doing with different organizations, I often see that a lot of organizations spend a lot of time and effort into content and the delivery. However, the focus is not given on what happens before and after, right? So when I say what happens before and after, why this learning really matters to them, and what would success look like? What is it that they intend to achieve by the end of this journey or the end of this intervention? If the organization starts looking at these areas, what happens before the training intervention begins and what happens after, and how do you measure the success of it? I think once you see clarity on these aspects, the impact would be much higher.
Very interesting insight. And yes, nowadays the organizations majorly that we see are focused on delivery and the content. Many times not even the content, only delivery, and the impact is just lost in this whole deal. Yeah. And that's what you absolutely said, that it's a journey that has to start right from problem identification to preparing the right content, delivering the right impact, which you will see post the intervention.
Another thing is when the learning is intentionally aligned to the business outcomes, right? That is when the impact is usually visible. I have also seen that a lot of organizations go by off-the-shelf trainings. They either design these learning interventions based on the competency frameworks or what's trending, right? Without even understanding what the real business ask is, or what is the challenge that their leaders are actually struggling with. So the impact is usually not visible when the why is not answered well.
Consulting lens, as per you, what is the biggest mistake that organizations make while designing L&D programs?
Adding on to what I had already shared, a lot of organizations design programs without even doing a check with what the leaders are actually struggling with. This has been a real challenge. So I'll talk about the experiences that I have had with different organizations. There have been organizations where the work has, where they've invested very heavily onto the design of the program, and the outcome of it has been very flourishing. Whereas there are certain organizations that just went by the frameworks or what's trending. They ask me one simple question as to, Roop, what is it that you're offering the other organizations? What is it that you're offering the other companies? So when I give them the list of offerings, they're like, why don't you pick this up for us, for our folks as well, for our leaders as well, and the teams that they are managing. So I go about designing the programs basis what I've heard with very little information just from the HR or the L&D. However, when I have had deeper conversations, when I've got into understanding the organization, the culture of the organization, when I've gone deeper into actually understanding what problems the teams face, right? Doing the diagnosis, that's when the real shift happens, right? That's when the program is designed very well. That's when the learning attention and the retention is also very high. So one of the mistakes that I would say is just looking at the surface level problem and not digging deeper into the root cause of what's actually happening in the workspace is a common mistake I see organizations doing, and hence the learning is not really as impactful as it's desired to be.
Is consulting-led L&D different from traditional programs as per you?
Very interesting question. I would say traditional training is like prescribing a medicine without diagnosis. Attaching to the earlier question that I answered. Over here, it's pure deeper diagnosis that happens in the L&D-led initiatives, where a lot of time is given into the discovery stage. So I usually go by this 4D approach, which begins with the discovery. That's where I spend quite a bit of time. That's where I spend about maximum time, doing 360-degree analysis, connecting with different stakeholders, understanding, and when the stakeholders says that this is what we really see as a gap, I really go back to those role holders and validate, is this what you really are looking for? Would this gap, if bridged, would help you become more productive, would help you become more meaningful in your workspace? So a lot of time on the diagnosis has been spent, and then we get into designing it. So it's a very iterative process, I would say. I go back to the stakeholders, interact with them after my design is put together, and then I get into the delivery, and then it is about you kind of draft and create a draft for your next intervention. So the 4D approach that I spoke about, it begins with discovery. It's about designing, delivering, and then drafting the feedback, drafting what improvements, reflections. This is a very holistic process, and I've been investing onto this 4D process for quite some time, and believe me, it's been very meaningful. And that's a consultative approach. Unlike the traditional, trainings where it's, as I said, it's kind of prescribing something without diagnosing. So I believe that's the difference, I would say.
That's great, because even we at Skillspring follow the same approach. Our principles are same here, and we also believe that one size does not fit everybody. The same thing that you said. So this is something which is very close to my heart, and I'm sure with every consultant and facilitator it's the same question. What is that one thing that makes learning stick?
Okay, that's a question I'm always asked. I believe every client interaction begins with this. So what makes learning stick for me is I would say these three elements. One is it has to be very, very relevant, right? And the second is it has to be practiced. And third, and the most important one, is reinforcement, right? if it's relevant, it makes you feel motivated to be in that space and continue applying those absorptions that you have had in the learning space. And if it is practice, it brings in so much of confidence in you. And reinforcement is so very important. Back to your workplace, you need to get into seeing how is it integrating with your work. Reinforcement is by having those deeper conversations on a regular basis, not just learning it, absorbing it, and leaving it there. You need to reinforce, and here is where leaders play a very, very important role into reinforcing the learnings that the participants absorb and take during the sessions. Bring it back, have conversations, give them space for experimentation. All of these makes learning really stick, right?
Great, I loved it. I'm sure people who have been listening to it, it's such a simple thing, but many times we or organizations do ignore this, and thank you so much. We know the world is changing and AI is evolving. So from your aspect or lens, wanted to know what are the new learning and development initiatives that you would like to share with all of us here?
Absolutely. I'll share a very recent experience of mine with the cohort who's been with me for a 6 months journey, right? So in the journey program, we do have certain checkpoints where we interact with these set of participants, the cohort who's been with me over the journey. So during the checkpoint, of course, these learning interventions are well invested by the organization, and we take in a lot of effort to understand the real need and design it. Right? Having said that, when there have been very rich discussions in the room, there were a lot of reflection, they challenged the assumptions, everything was great. There were insights that they were gaining and they were absorbing and taking back with them. Now when I did a check-in with these participants, the outcome was very, remarkable, or I would say it was a little surprising to me when I could see the outcomes of different teams. So this cohort was made of three different teams. When I saw the outcomes of these different teams, I could sense that there is a lot of difference in the way each team performs. And while understanding it more from these participants, I realized it is the leader who played a real important role. There were teams whose leader allowed them to experiment, allowed them to make mistakes. There was a sense of psychological safety that was created by this leader. Whereas there were leaders of other teams who went on to do business as usual, right? There was no discussion around what was the learning. There was no conversations around. There were no feedbacks. There was no accountability that was established in the team. And hence I would strongly say that a leader plays a very, very important role, a very impactful role in helping the learning sustain or, just die down.
Absolutely. In fact, even I feel that the whole workshop, if it's in the right mindset by the leader, it is successful. 50%, I think, the journey begins there itself, success journey. Now, as the world is evolving and everybody is moving towards AI and, different things every day are evolving where learning is concerned. So as per you, what are the new trends in the learning and development consulting space that you want to share with everyone over here?
First and foremost, I believe AI and data are reshaping how learning is, imparted, learning is perceived, and learning is implemented. Along with that, I see a lot of need for the skill-based. People are looking at personalized learning interventions. Gone are the days when they would really look at those learning tutorials. I don't see any of my clients in the last 4-5 years, or rather, if I'm saying 5 years to be very long, in the last 3-4 years, I've not seen my clients asking me for those learning tutorials, which is like something that you just offer as a part of your package, right? Right now, they're looking at something which is helping them in their own skill development, and it's more personalized. Along with that, what I also see trending, or what's something that the organizations are really longing for, is to do a lot of work with respect to emotional intelligence, right? That's something that I'm seeing a lot. Maybe it's packaged very differently, it's been asked very differently. A lot of work on self-awareness. I am doing in the last 2 years and what has been a ask as well, right? And the reason I stepped into doing my research in psychological safety was also because I have seen people don't understand the true elements of what creates psychological safety, what tools really create psychological safety. Hence, a lot of focus has been given on vulnerability, resilience. A lot of focus is also on, how do we foster trust within the team. So I believe these are spaces that are being asked by a lot of my clients, a lot of organizations across industries.
Your advice to organizations that want to improve their learning effectiveness?
Thanks, Pooja, for asking this question. Maybe I'm not the right person, or rather, I don't believe in advices. However, it's an invitation for every organization to reflect upon is don't design training as a event, design it as a learning journey. I'll go back to the 3 elements that I spoke about. What makes learning really stick is your relevance, your practice and reinforcement. And this would only happen when you are walking along a facilitator, along a cohort in a journey rather than just an event, right? So design these journey interventions, make it reinforce. That's a miss that I see a lot of organizations don't invest on the after training, interventions. It's just tick in the box for some of us, some of the organizations, and for some they are deeply invested into it. So the invitation would be to focus on a long-term learning journey with a blend of coaching, a blend of facilitation and training. A lot of organizations that I see, I interact, I connect, and I work are not very open to facilitative mode of intervention. They are okay with a training led. However, I would say be open to more facilitation, because that is the moment you have the harvest from the group's wisdom. When you harvest the group's wisdom, there's a lot of buy-in from the participants, and there's a lot of commitment from the participants that you see. And that's an invitation to all the organizations to think through, to ponder upon, rather than an advice.
Something again which I feel would be relevant with everybody over there. So what are some of the initiatives or ownership that every person can take for their own learning?
Okay, very, very thoughtful question, and I'll answer it in one simple statement. For me, ownership begins with curiosity, a lot of curiosity. I would strongly, suggest to develop that curiosity mindset. Look at what is something that I would want to, what's something I need to unlearn, learn and relearn. Just ask yourself these 3 questions, or look at answering yourself in these 3 aspects, right? You are your own decision owners. When you start thinking about what is something that I would want to accomplish, and begin with the end in mind, and start looking backwards as to what would help me achieve this. And once you become so clear about what you want to accomplish and what is something that will take you there, start asking yourself, is there something that I really need to unlearn? Is there something that I want to pick up, and something that I might have to relearn as I walk towards my accomplishments? So it's with a lot of curiosity, a lot of reflection, that you start taking in ownership for who you want to be from where you are today.
That's really interesting, and again something very simple which even anybody can do. Like, what do I really want to learn, and what are the steps that I have to follow? And great, the way you mentioned it so simply, Roopshree, has so much value to it. And the last question, and thank you so much. This journey has been really insightful with you. I learned so much, being with you, and I'm sure everybody who would listen to us. So my last question for you is, what is that one last takeaway that you would like to share with everybody over here pertaining to learning and development?
So learning and development is not just about delivering programs. Learning and development is about enabling change. So it's not about what people are taking back after they left the program. It is about what are they doing differently long after the program has ended, right? That's the true impact of these learning and development initiatives. So there has to be a lot of real-time conversations that have to happen. There has to be a way that you can reinforce, rebring, reflect on what you have focused on during your learning and development interventions. Yeah, so it's not just a program. That's not the journey that the L&D spaces really create. It's long after the program has been attended. How is it making me come out as a very different person, bringing out my different version? I believe that is what L&D spaces really do. That is what consultants like us are really wanting to achieve. Rather than just being in the room, we want to see the shift. We want to see that needle movement happening after the intervention has happened, long after the intervention has happened.
Everybody for being there, for listening to us at Learning Under the Surface, and thanks Roopshree for all the gems of advice which really helped with regards to how can we make the training productive, the latest trends that we have learned from you, and the mantras that you gave for leadership and learning and consulting. So really appreciate this. Thank you everybody. This is Pooja Sharma, me signing off, and look forward to meeting you soon in our next episode of Learning Under the Surface.